Thanks, everybody. I am the director of Pima Animal Care Center in Tucson, Arizona. Most people don't know what a Pima is, but it's a great big giant county. It's 9,000 square miles, so that's the same size as the state of New Hampshire. It encompasses 2 Indian nations. It also holds the longest stretch of the US-Mexico border and is doing a valiant job fighting the possible erection of a border wall. It's a fascinating community to work in. It's arguably the 5th poorest city in the United States. And so coming there, this will be the 3rd large municipal shelter that I've worked in 7 years. And coming there, I was really tired, like many of you may be, of people telling me just to get more volunteers. Have you all heard that before? Just have volunteers do it? And I know that volunteers can do a lot. We have 90,000 volunteer hours a year at my shelter. And they do everything from play groups to adoptions, any job that exists in the shelter we have volunteers doing, but it isn't that simple. It's a more complex picture that I needed to figure out when I wanted to learn how to really leverage my staff. I had limited budget, limited staffing, and a total intake of about 17,000 pets. 17,000 is a big number, but in Pima County, 25% of those animals have critical or urgent medical needs. So it makes the job even harder. Today's session is not going to be you sitting and listening to me talk. I often talk about how I have ADD and it's really hard for me to sit through an hour-long session. And so I built this session for those of you who are tired of listening and want to start doing right now. We come to these conferences and we sort of spin. You sit in the sessions and your head is so busy and you're like, let's get started. We're going to do that today in this session. So did everyone get a marker? Cool. If you don't have a marker, someone in this room has the big marker sack. Okay, so grab a marker. You're going to need it. This presentation is called How to Get More Staff Without Spending More Money. And we have proven we can do this a number of times. In 2 shelters, we've built full, comprehensive 6 to 7 person behavior and enrichment teams without adding any staff, any additional funds. So this is our behavior and enrichment team at Pima, except for Michelle, who some of you saw speak. But 3 of the folks in that picture, we made their positions just by moving staff around. And it seems really hard to do this, but today you're going to learn how. That's me and Peanut. Okay. So the way this is going to work is that if you are with someone from your organization, you're going to stick with them. You're going to build your organizational profile together. You're going to need to Google. I'm guessing you'll need your phone, but I'm going to walk you through how to build a complete organizational profile to look at how to start moving some pieces around. It doesn't matter if you're an advocate, a director, a person that works in a shelter, and it doesn't matter if you know all the answers to the questions I'm going to ask. Guessing or sort of doing the parts that you can are fine, and Google will work well for the rest. So we're going to be looking at the following. Your organizational chart, how many people live in the community that you serve, how many animals are in the community that are in the shelter that you're working with, the square miles of your service area, the number of adoptions that are done, the per capita adoption rate, which we're going to show you how to calculate, the number of volunteers and fosters, and your budget. So we're going to draw all those things on your poster. So right now, you're going to find anyone that's from your organization, and you're going to get up, and you're going to go find a piece of paper on the wall with your marker. If you're from the same organization, stay with that organization. And I see a couple of best frienders in the room. I just want to say that Liz Finch did this, and she drew the entire best friends org chart on a piece of poster board. You're going to use your whole poster. So the first thing that we're going to do is you're going to draw your org chart. So I just switched slides, and you can look up, this is my org chart, and I did not draw it with a marker. but this is how you want to draw your organizational chart. The leader, whether it's a rescue group or shelter, the leader at the top, followed by any staff underneath that, and you want to put everybody in little boxes by the name of their position, not by their name.
What I'm finding over there is that tons of these little rescue helping shelters move. What I'm finding over there is that tons of these little rescue shelters that move.
Okay, everybody, we're going to switch to the next thing. Okay, so you're doing your total intake of dogs and cats. This is an example of our intake from my shelter. So my total intake is 17,023. And the next thing that you're going to want to know, for those of you who've already written down your intake, is how many people live in the area that you serve. Whether you're a rescue or a shelter, how many people live in the area that you serve. The next thing is how many adoptions you did last year. How many adoptions? So at our shelter, we did 10,893 adoptions last year. If you don't have your 2018 data, it's fine to use 2017. Most of you will have that. But how many adoptions are you doing in 1 year? Okay, so now is where we do math. What did Ellen say? Everyone hates math, but it's something that lives in our world. I think that was her quote. So here's where the math comes in. Once you've written down your adoptions and the number of people that live in your community, you're going to figure out your per capita adoption rate. And you do that by dividing the total number of adoptions into the total number of people who live in your community. And I put up an example from PAC. Our adoption rate is about 1%. Okay, how many square miles is the area you serve? So I told you that Pima County is 9,000 square miles, or roughly the size of New Hampshire. So how many, and you can Google this. This is Googleable. Most of you won't know the answer. So how many volunteers do you have? This is important. There's a caveat. That serves 6 hours a month minimum. That's a national standard for an active volunteer. 6 hours a month minimum. Not your once-a-year people, not your volunteer groups. How many volunteers do you have that serve 6 hours a month? If you don't know how many volunteers are in your organization, it's another one of those things. It's okay to estimate it, but it's better to underestimate than overestimate. And if you're done with that, how many foster caregivers, active foster caregivers do you have? Not number of animals to foster, but how many active foster caregivers? Okay, now I want to know something really that this might be the hardest one for a lot of you, because a lot of people that are not directors don't know their budgets. What is your annual operating budget? Annual operating budget, it might be 0, it might be 15 million, and you may not have an idea. If you know the approximate budget, that's fine. We don't need to know that it's 12,839,462. It's fine to say 13 million. Anybody know Lindsay Huffman? Her budget was 240,000 for 3,500 intake in her open admission shelter, and she saved 97% for 2 years running. Okay, so the last one is you get to be creative and you get to tell us one thing about your organization, one metric that I didn't ask for. Pick any metric. It can be transfers, it can be euthanasia, it can be one thing that I didn't ask for that you want us to know about your organization. Maybe you want us to know how many pets you transferred to rescue. Maybe you didn't have an extra metric to share. The last thing that we want you to write on your org chart is your best guess at your raw save rate. So I'm not interested at all in your Asilomar save rate or how many animals you're saving after you back out the ones that died and were owner requests. We want to know your raw save rate for this. So that's how many animals, and the way that you calculate that is the number of live outcomes over total outcomes in a year. And if you don't have access to this information, again, it's okay to guess. You may not have access to 2018. But be as honest as you can be, because this session's all about honestly looking at our data. Okay, so it's time to head back to your seats. And again, I'm asking everybody to squish up to the front of the room because we're going to be looking at some of these org charts. What surprised you looking at other people's org charts? The high intake numbers. Yeah, I worked in Fairfax for 3 years where I thought 5,000 was a lot. And coming to the Southwest, that's like a tiny shelter. What else? Yeah?
How different most of them were? I thought a lot of them was a different structure.
How different they are? How different our organizational structures are? Wendy?
How many are over 90%? Amazing. Yeah.
How many of the organizations are reporting over 90%? It's pretty cool.
It's where they actually report up to, right? Whether it's police, whether it's shelter directors at the top, it's one with the mayor at the top. The fact that they follow different paths of actually who's the buck stops with a very different person.
It's a really good point. He said that it's who they're reporting to. So some shelters are pushed way down in local government structures, and they're under a department. Some of them are at the very top. Some shelters fall right under the mayor, some fall under police departments. And who you fall under makes a big difference to your organization. Lars?
I saw no correlation between size and budget.
No correlation between size of budget and the save rate, right? It's the Lindsay Huffman hypothesis. $250,000 operating budget for 3,500 animals and a 97% save rate. Still confounds us a little bit about why that's true. Okay, what else? What else surprised you?
I think the amount of volunteers and fosters. Yeah. Some organizations can't get any, some have a ton.
The amount of volunteers and fosters is always what shocks me about looking at these charts. Because in our organization, we have 1,200 active volunteers serving 90,000 hours of service annually, which is the equivalent of 40 full-time staff positions. If you don't have volunteers, it's not because they're not in your community, it's because you have barriers to getting them, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. It's a really good point. Anything else? Okay. What surprised you about looking at your own metrics and your own org chart? Was there anything in there that you were like, huh? Yes?
The adoption per capita. This is kind of sad.
The adoption per capita rate, lower or higher than you expected? A lot of potential there, right? If we could reach more people. I was thinking today, Bonnie Brown says this thing, she said this thing for years, that people get a mattress and a new pet about every 8 years. And I was thinking, like, what if we had as many adoption centers as mattress stores? That per capita rate would probably go up a whole lot. What else? What else did you learn looking at your own org charts and your own metrics? Yes?
And it's really natural and it's like pretty supportive community. I mean, I work for a really small rescue, but there's a lot of really big rescues, and I think a lot of the other ones we're looking around are like huge areas. So we have a lot of support in a small area. So I noticed that looking around.
The different service areas that you serve, it's all about perspective, right? This is another thing. When I was in Fairfax, I think it was 400 square miles. We went to Austin, which was 900, and I was like, 900 square miles is outrageous. And then Tucson's 9,000. So, what else? Yes?
The lack of resources and staff that our facility has compared to
Cool. So when we get up to give people a chance to share their org charts, you should get up and talk about yours, whether or not I smiled it. She was talking about the lack of staff resources. Some of you have these like huge staffs. I know Phoenix has like 6 marketing people, and I'm like forever jealous, but I'm like, don't use them that way. It's exciting that they have that many, but some of you have a ton of room to reallocate staff. Do you know the 2 most common areas that we see people having too many staff? The most common, there's a lot, but there's 2 that are most common. What? Too many on the top, that isn't one. But arguably, I'm the wrong person to say that. So, caretakers, no, not really. That's a tough one because you're balancing capacity for care with life-saving. Caretakers are usually about where they need to be or a little fewer. Medical? No? Front office, I heard. And if you mean intake, yes. Intake is one of the areas where we find there are a lot of darn staff allocated to taking animals into the shelter. So we took a couple of our intake folks and we turned them into what we call keeping families together counselors. It's a totally different role. What do you think the difference is? Yep, they're there to keep families together, and their mission is to recognize the bonds between interspecies families. So we consider everyone that comes to be a family unit, whether they have a stray pet or a found pet, and their whole job is to keep the person with the family. We have a whole call center dedicated to that. What else? So that's one, intake. A lot of people. A lot more. Usually there's double the staff dedicated to intake than there are to outcomes. Double the staff. What else? Bureaucracy, yeah, that's my job. So I don't think that there's often, I think, yes, in some organizations that's true. You'll see a really top-heavy managerial chart, and some of you we might see a couple examples of that today. Too many marketing people, but that's probably number 3. Number 2 is actually animal control. Because if you have, so one community we were talking to yesterday has 60 animal control officers. And their job is still to bring animals out of the community and to put them in the shelter. And if you're coming to my keynote tomorrow, I'm going to talk about why that's just such a broken idea. Animal control is one of the easiest places. How many of you oversee animal control services or your organization does? A lot of you don't, and you have no control. But a lot of you who run rescue groups in communities where there is a way too top-heavy animal control, you can work as advocates. Do you all feel like, so this thing is broken up between advocates, leaders, and doers or something like that. Do you ever feel like you wear different hats? You're not always one of those things. So as we're talking about this today, even if it's not totally making sense for your rescue group, if you're running a rescue group, chances are you're pulling animals out of a shelter that's killing too many animals. So think about using some of what you're learning today to put on your advocate hat. Okay, so you have to decide really what you need more of, and what you need more of is going to be based on some of your org charts, which I'm going to have you come up and talk about. And you also need to know what you need less of, because there's a reality that when you do if you're not adding resources and you're just shifting staff around, you are going to lose something. So if you are, this is one of our volunteers, but we were paying a couple of staff members to do care and readiness stuff for pets in the shelter, and now volunteers do all of that. So we were willing to lose that. That was a totally cool volunteer role so that we could use our staff to work with our harder behavior dogs. We needed to create a behavior and enrichment team of 6 people. We have 400 to 600 dogs on site on any given day, and just as many in foster. So with a population of 1,200 dogs at any time, we had to pull resources. And I don't need fluffy, smelling like roses, as much as I need our harder and long-stay dogs to have advocacy. So that was a choice I made. So you have to look at your organizational chart. This is our current one, but I change my org chart probably every 3 months. And we don't do this enough. Every one of you should have a living org chart, whether or not you have 2 employees or you have 200. Your organizational chart should be a living document. It should never be set in stone. So our communications department designs this for me, and they get so pissed off because every week I call them and I'm like, so could we move this box over to this area? And they're like, are your employees going crazy? And they're not. Actually, our employees are really excited because they know that they have the power to change what this looks like at any time. So thanks to doing that, we have 4 foster coordinators. How many of you have a foster coordinator in your organization? Wow, that's awesome. Can you raise your hands again? You know, a year ago, probably about a third of you would have raised your hands. It's really exciting. How many of you have a volunteer coordinator? Okay, you all need those things. Those things for no-kill sheltering are essential. But having 15 staff dedicated to intakes is not essential. So you should constantly be reevaluating your org chart. And you should be ready to reassign staff. This is one of the hardest parts of my job. So when I got to Pima, they were already doing a pretty amazing job. My predecessors in the room, hi, Jose. He had already taken the shelter from like 45% save rate to almost 90%, and they were doing really incredible work. They had started this thing called a pet support call center, fully grant funded. That call center, which is like dispatch except for solutions, 8,000 calls a month come into that pet support center, fully grant funded. They had already done a lot, but they had a regressive animal control unit. They had old school, go pick up the dogs. My job is just to round up stray animals and write tickets. So we had to say we are willing to give up some of that. Our duties are to public safety, they're to prosecuting cruelty and neglect, but we don't need their only job anymore to be round up dogs and write tickets. And so we said to them, we're revisioning your role in the community. And we created animal control officers who are now called animal protection officers. And this is 2 of them on either end. Do you notice that they're not wearing uniforms? They're not even wearing black polo shirts. They're wearing our regular old shelter shirts. And do you know what they're doing? They're at a homeless event, which they go to 3 times a week to serve people facing homelessness. And they stand there with dog food and leashes and collars. And Daniel, who's in the maroon shirt, he was one of the leaders, and he was one of the old school officers who made the transition, and not everybody did. But he said to me a couple of months ago, you know, I've done this work for so many years, and I would drive around, and everybody would run away. They were so scared to talk to us. And they would hide because the only thing we ever did was punish them. And he said, now I'm driving through the streets, and I can't stop people from running up to my truck. And he said, so that's cool. And Dr. Jefferson talked a little bit about that today. But the thing he said that really struck me was that when there's cruelty and neglect happening among underserved folks in the community, people facing homelessness, people in very, very poor high-intake areas, they're actually reporting the true cases of cruelty and neglect to them now, whereas before they wouldn't have. Because they know that the first thing our officers are going to go in is solutions. They're going to go try to find solutions. They're not going to try to just punish people right off the bat. We issue citations when appropriate, but the first thing we're going to do is try to help. And so we're actually doing a better job as animal control officers because we're creating these relationships. And so that's one example. We had no extra money, but we said we're going to do something really, really different with this program. So that's a situation where you don't even have to get rid of the position. You don't even have to say you have a new position now and I'm going to move this over here. You just change what the position does. And now we have this huge function, and we do this giant support program in the community. And what happened this year is we tracked the data. The people that we fix their fences, give them leashes and collars, give them dog houses, our reoffense rate on those folks is 0%. We haven't had one person reoffend who we've helped. Now, let's say you have a big old animal control and you need those positions for something else. You need to turn them into adoption counselors. That's another move you may consider making as an organization. Animal control and intake, they're both devoted to bringing animals in unless you change something about that. Volunteers. If y'all have 0 to 50 to 100 volunteers, you don't even have a volunteer program yet. The metric that we use in general, one volunteer coordinator should be coordinating 500 volunteers. How many of you feel like your volunteer coordinators are not performing to that level? 500 volunteers. Our volunteer coordinator coordinates 1,200. That is difficult. She's very tired. But it's possible. And if you're running a foster program and your foster numbers are somewhere in the tens or even hundreds, you're not running a real foster program yet either. So last year we did a test. We wanted to build the world's largest foster program. We asked Maddie's, can we build the world's largest foster program? And they said yes. And they gave us the support for 3 additional foster coordinator positions. So we had 4 foster coordinators. And the day that they all started, we said, you're not just running a foster program, you're going to run the world's biggest foster program. And we gave them really high expectations. And in 1 year, we already had a pretty good foster program. In 1 year, at our municipal shelter, those folks sent 5,000 animals to foster homes. 5,000. We don't have rescue support. Foster's it for us. So you have to think bigger, too, about your volunteer and foster programs. Looking at your charts, I don't see one of your organizations that is truly recognizing the capacity of those 2 programs. So really quick, before you go to your org charts, we have been able to, through moving staff around, reallocating resources, we've been able to hire 2 additional adoption counselors, create a behavior and enrichment team, build a pet support and outreach program, hire somebody called a cat critical care specialist, hire 3 foster coordinators, and we have created this keeping families together position, and their whole job is to keep animals in homes and out of the shelter. So that's really just by moving around resources that we've been able to do that. So now it's time for you to talk again. If I have put a smiley face on your org chart, it's because I think your org chart is a good example the rest of us can learn from. So what I'm going to ask now is that you just sort of self-organize that if you're a smiley face org chart, I want you to bring your org chart up to the front, pop it on the thing, and you're going to run us through your data really quickly. I picked out a few cases that I think are indicative of what we see commonly. So we're going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us the name of your shelter, and then run us through your organizational structure and the data points that we asked for.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacob Alderas, and I'm on the Rosenberg City Council. This is the Rosenberg Municipal Shelter. Let me run through the organization first. It's pretty top-heavy, going from mayor to the city council to the police chief. Then he gives that to the assistant chief, then the shelter director. We're finally at animal control here. They manage a shelter manager and a shelter supervisor. Then there's 1 receptionist and 1 kennel tech. The supervisor also doubles as animal control officer and kennel tech, so they're kind of multi-purpose. We have about 1,100 intake per year, a population of 42,000, only 250 adoptions. That's a per capita adoption rate of 0.05%. And that's 25.7 square miles, no volunteers for the Rosenberg Municipal Shelter, and only 1 foster. We're running a $398,000 a year budget and currently a 70% live release rate.
Thank you.
So the 398 budget, that includes the high-rips also?
No, that only includes from here down. Yes, if these others are way more, but they serve other functions. It's just added bureaucracy to get to where we need to be.
Okay, guys, what's the first thing you do to change this org chart? Or what is the first thing you do in this organization if you walked in?
Well, the volunteer
Volunteer programs. So what's up with that?
So as far as the volunteer program is concerned, unfortunately, I ended up on the wrong side of a 4-3 council. And the majority, including the mayor, decided that he wanted no volunteers on city property. So killed all volunteer programs. We had about 25 active volunteers that gave way more than 6 hours per week. And that they were all chased out.
Was that 70% live rate?
That's been declining. Yes, that's declining. Yes. Quick history, if that's okay.
Really quick.
Yes. In July 3rd, a no-kill resolution was passed in order to achieve a 90% save rate and live release rate in Rosenberg. However, that was repealed in November, and ever since then, it's been on the rapid decline as far as the live release rate is concerned. Soon it'll be close to 50-40% where it was beforehand.
I picked this one because this is a really tough situation. It's one that I can't imagine being in. I think I would probably just quit. It's amazing, credit to you, that you've stuck around
Thank you.
to help change this situation. So a couple of things. I think you should take pictures of everyone's org chart and take those home and text them one by one to your to your mayor. And two, in this situation, one of the hardest, trickiest things that leaders have to do is help find advocates who can fight for some of this change. Because it sounds to me like it's going to take some outside advocacy, right? That change may not just come from within.
Right. And I can't text the mayor. He doesn't know how to. He has a flip phone.
So maybe what you can start doing in the meantime is driving animals off of city property and dropping them off with volunteers so you can hang out with them.
Yes. Yes.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I'm Carrie. I'm the director of the DeKalb Animal Shelter for Lifeline Animal Project in Chamblee, Georgia. This is Andrea Peterson. She's our senior director of operations. And I do have to explain one thing. We did just get an increase. We got the 5-year contract for DeKalb County again, awarded in January. So our budget and our number of staff has went up tremendously. So we may actually have to play with this some because we're still kind of checking it out. But so our intake is 7,935 in 2018. Population in DeKalb County is 755,000. We had 2,950 adoptions. Our adoption per capita is 0.4%. We have 271 square miles in DeKalb County. Average around probably 66 volunteers a month that give that many hours. Last check, we had about 130 foster homes that actively had animals. We do have more foster homes in kitten season. Our budget was just increased to $2.4 million. And we had a save rate of 87.1% for all of 2018. And we have been our 7.9 was our euthanasia rate for all of 2018 as well.
So what's next for you guys?
Well, we finally actually just got the money. So we plugged in what we think is going to work for us. And we mainly increased a lot in animal care. We increased a lot in placement, mainly adoption counselors, matchmakers. We have a behavior consultant that we're looking to hire. If anyone's a behavior consultant, we're still looking. We're adding another veterinarian to our team to get the dogs make ready quicker, so we can get them out of the building. So we'll probably be playing with staff a little bit, but this is what we think is going to work for us.
So I asked Lifeline to be one of the smiley faces because they're one of my hero organizations. What most people don't know is that in any given kennel, there may be 6 to 9 medium-large dogs in a kennel. They're tremendously challenged on space. They have a ton of big dogs, and yet they value every one of their lives. And so what I wondered from you all is, given that you're in this constant capacity, particularly with big dogs, how do you think you can change that, something on that page, to better serve those big dogs that you deal with? Because you guys do it you guys have almost the biggest challenge of anyone I know when it comes to that issue.
So one thing to correct, the DeKalb County used to be that way. We have a new shelter. So they actually aren't not that many dogs to a kennel right now. Our Fulton County shelter, which we also run, is that way. But I think one of the things that we do want to do is we recognize that we need to increase our numbers in foster care. After hearing your 500 per volunteer coordinator, we obviously need to up that a little bit. But definitely our foster program is our big focus right now to try to get more out. We used to average around 50 large dogs in foster care at any time. Within a couple of months, we've raised that up to a little over 80. So we're hoping to keep pushing that up, and that it's just space outside the shelter, and that's our problem.
When you say large dogs, what's about the size of those dogs?
Most of our dogs are probably around 65 to 75 pounds. They are all mixed breed. We don't label breeds in our shelter, but they're all the kind of mixed breed that a lot of people have in your shelter.
It's okay, you can say it, pit bull dogs.
Yeah.
They're pit bull dogs.
They are. So that's probably, I would say 75% of ours are blocky-headed, bully-type breed dogs.
Okay, we're going to move on. We've got 10 minutes, and we've got 4 charts. So thank you. And if you don't know Lifeline, check them out because they really do kick some butt on life-saving. And they've sent 4 people to our foster apprenticeship at PAC, which if you don't know about, go to the Maddie website.
Hello, everybody. My name's Jennifer Barrera, and I am the outreach and manager for the city of Houston. So we're the municipal animal shelter, and we are an open intake. We have a director, we have 3 division managers, and then we have managers below that. So we have an AEO manager, 2 AEO managers, 1 customer service manager, 1 outreach manager, and now 3 shelter supervisors and 1 medical supervisor. Underneath that, we have a couple of supervisors as well, and so this is kind of our org chart, and of course we're part of the administrative and regulatory affairs division, and then of course city council and mayor. So our total intake ranges from 27,000 to 23,000. We have a 2.3 million population. Our adoptions was at 6,590. Our PACC is 0.29%, and we are at a 600 square miles area. Our volunteers range about 900 volunteers who have actually returned. We have about 150 animals in foster care currently, and our budget is 13 million. Transfers is the fact that I just wanted to share that, 9,728, and then our live release is 84.6 for 2018. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the thing that stood out to me like a sore thumb on here I circled. What is that? 2.3 billion people, 23 to 27,000 intake, and adoption rate of 6,600. I'm amazed that you guys are transferring as many as you can, but your community could support more pet adoption. Does that stick out to you too?
Yep.
So what are you going to do when you get home?
So we are trying to ramp up our mobile adoption trailer again. We're currently in a hiring freeze, so that means that we have to staff back. So we're ramping our adoptions through our mobile adoption trailer. So that's definitely something we're trying to push. But if anybody has any suggestions, we're happy to hear.
Cool. Let's take those afterwards because I want to get through the rest of these guys. Cool. But thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And thanks for everybody who's like brave enough to come up here and do this. It's amazing. Thank you all for doing this.
Okay, hi, I'm Mike Gillis, Director of Corpus Christi Animal Care Services. In a nutshell, I am the director. I'm in a fortunate or unfortunate position where the buck does start and stop with me. I report to the police chief, who also duals hat is the assistant city manager. So I have carte blanche there, so good or bad, that's how it is. Including me, I have a total of 33 staff. Of those staff, 19 of them are animal control officers. I'll make a quick comment on that. I also respond to 50 bite cases every month, and every week I have a minimum of 4 animal cruelty cases going on. So that 19 doesn't seem like enough almost every day. I've got 2 full-time kennel staff. I've got 100 dog kennels and 30 cat kennels, and I've got 2 kennel staff. Nobody dedicated to live release. I've got three admins. These are the folks that manage the front desk, manage the public, take the heat from the public, get yelled at, and help me with my budget. I've got 1 DVM, 1 veterinarian, and 2 vet techs that try and keep up with the. Most of their time is spent on the cruelty cases, obviously. Animals per year, about 6,000 animals a year. I cover about 305 square miles. We were able to, with no adoption counselors, we were able to squeeze out last year about 1,000 adoptions. How we did it, I don't know. I know I was out front a lot trying to say, take Fluffy. You like Fluffy, he's really good. Fosters, non-existent. There's history behind that. Doesn't really matter. It is what it is. Volunteers, basically non-existent. I've got 10 volunteers that show up regular. Got an okay budget of $2.8 million. But I'd say half of that is tied up in personnel costs right now. My rescues are a pretty good supporter for me, about over 1,200, and animals went out to rescue last year, and we were still able to pull off last year a live release rate of 80%. And my dogs were about 86%, and cats were whatever it was, 60%. Cats don't get much attention in Corpus Christi until now.
Thank you, Mike. So Mike's one of those charts that like I look at and I'm like, you know, I felt bad when I woke up this morning, but I feel a little better because I don't have to deal with this set of insane problems, right? It's like one thing after another, and Mike went there having worked at Austin, and so he knows all the answers. So what do you think, where do you think him as the director needs to focus his energy? And the hint is, it's not on any one program, it's on an action he can take involving part of the community.
The challenge with the volunteers was historically, there was no director, it was always a police captain. And the police captains would come in for a year at a time. Shaking your head, you know what I'm talking about. Every captain had their own way of doing things. And over the course of X number of years, the captains, you know, pissed off enough of the volunteers where they all just went away.
Here's what Mike has going for him. He has 6,000 intake. That's pretty tame. He's got a lot of people to take the animals. He's got some good rescue partners. The other thing he has going for him is that he's really articulate and he knows the right way to do things. Mike needs to put his energy in politics. He needs to put his energy into training the community that there's a better way. He already knows all the answers, so he needs to figure out a way to get out of the adoption floor and stop telling people to take home Fluffy and get into the city council members' offices and into parts of the community that can have influence to change some of this. But
I brought one of my city council members with me. He's spending 3 days here with me.
Just super awesome. All right, 2 more, and you guys got to do like the 2-minute version because they're going to kick us out of the room.
All right, I'm Alexis, and I'm from Williamson County Regional Animal Shelter, just north of here. Our budget is about $2 million for the year. Our intake is 6,309 animals. We have a 500,000 population. We adopt out 4,510 animals every year, or last year. We cover 2,309 square miles. We have, our per capita was 0.9%. Our save rate is 97%. My little added figure was over 1,000 returned to owners.
Awesome.
For our organization is Cheryl's the director. She does report to, I believe, the county judge. However, he doesn't really get involved within the shelter kind of stuff. We do have a shelter vet we just got as of October this year. We have a community outreach. We have a volunteer foster coordinator kind of / position. There's an admin and her staff. I'm the kennel manager, so I cover the behavior tech, all of our vet. We have 5 vet techs, 1 specifically for surgery, and then an off-site counselor and a bunch of animal care, full-time and part-time.
Okay, so I used you guys as an example of how to get it fixed, because Cheryl's been there how long?
Probably right before me, so probably almost 10 years, I think.
Cheryl's been there about a decade, and Williamson County is a real model. They're resource challenged. They have a doable budget, but they sit in the shadow of Austin, which I do not envy. So they're a neighboring county, and that brings its own set of challenges with as high profile as Austin is. And Cheryl's carved out this niche in this small community that otherwise would have killed 60%. And so their org chart and where Cheryl's gotten them really is a model that others of us who are kind of struggle with resources, but it's doable, can look to. So that was what I wanted to share. But what's one thing you want to change having done this session?
So as a kennel manager, we have a new shelter like being renovated and built, and we'll move into that in the next month or so. So kind of an adoption center. We will be getting a few more animal care positions. So my goal is, like right now we just have 1 behavior tech, and that is not enough for the amount of behavior dogs that we have. He just doesn't have the time. We've tried using volunteers in those positions, and they prefer walking the dogs versus doing BMOD. So I want to take some of these staff and kind of put them working with him specifically to focus more on those harder to adopt dogs. the last few percent.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
And last we have Jordan. And Jordan, you cannot take us through your whole org chart because we will be here all day. Dallas Animal Services, huge organization. Jordan, will you focus on the metrics that we asked you to share?
Yeah. Just so you know, Dallas Animal Services, we have 180 employees, and 80 in shelter. Majority of them are field officers. Our total intake is 35,000. Majority of them are dogs, very small amount of cats. The total population is only 1.3 million for that intake. Adoptions, we had just shy of 13,000 last fiscal year, and our per capita is 0.98%. We have 20, I would say, volunteers that are doing 6 hours on a regular basis. It's abysmal. Our foster program is 95 currently. In the bigger season, it's at least double that. Budget, we've got just shy of 15 million, and our raw data is, for the fiscal year, was 81% live release rate. Right now, with adding on these last couple months, we're more at 85.
Thanks, Jordan.
Oh, I should mention too, we transfer out just shy of 7,000 animals to other rescue groups.
What are you going to do about this volunteer problem?
We just got a volunteer coordinator on in December.
Okay.
The person that was in that role had been vacant for months, and that person had kind of left a gap, and we're rebuilding aggressively. But
Jose, when you built the volunteer program in Pima, did you find that the volunteers were advocates to stop the killing of pets? Like, as more volunteers were seeing pets, did that help stop pets from dying?
Yeah, for sure. The more volunteers we had in, the more people in the community we had advocating. And as a municipal director or a municipal employee, there's things you just can't advocate for, things you can't say. So you need those people who can go strategically say the things you would like them to say when you'd like them to say it, so that they're helping you achieve your plan.
I think the smartest thing, coming in after Jose, I think the smartest thing one of the smartest things that they did was to build this giant volunteer program, because all of a sudden there were no dark places. There were no secrets. There were no animals hiding in the back. Everything was being seen by volunteers, and those volunteers were able to do what Jose in that community never could have done. He would have lost his job and bring the shelter to 90. And I would challenge you to give yourself 3 months to have 500 volunteers in that shelter.
absolutely.
I can't believe how honest you all were. I can't believe how open you all were. I had no idea if this would be a colossal failure, and I am so grateful that you gave all of this to us. You can do one of two things. You can take your poster with you, or you can take a picture of it. Either one's fine. Whatever you don't take, we're going to be saving, because we're trying to collect this information to start to put together some key performance indicators on some of these metrics. And all of you, I will leave you with the message to go grow your volunteer programs. All of you in this room, go build those volunteer programs. The people are out there. Thank you.